A love triangle can tear people apart, especially if it involves you, your husband-to-be, and your mother. Yeah, I know. Sad and complicated, isn't it? But let me tell you my story. I am Linda. I am 21 years old. I was a ballerina, and I loved acting on stages and theaters. I enjoyed all kinds of arts. They called me the butterfly because I was always supporting my colleagues and giving them positive energy. I didn't care much about love stories because I felt that none of the boys I'd ever met ever rose to the level of hero in my assessment. That is, until I met Ethan. He was an angel, handsome, educated, and a true artist. He could play music, draw, and direct movies. He was adored by all the girls on our drama team. And when he was assigned to direct our play, I ended up adoring him too. I liked everything about him. His voice, his speech, his manner, his style, and that lovely smile of his. One day, I decided to tell him about my love for him. He was working in the theater, and I asked him if he could excuse himself for 5 minutes so I could speak with him in private. He accepted, and once we were alone, I confessed to him, "Ethan, I think I love you." He was mildly surprised and pleased, it seemed, and he asked me to repeat my words again. I did, and he suddenly swept me into his arms and embraced me and said, "You are the answer to all my dreams, Linda. I have loved you from the first day I laid eyes on you." We began spending a lot of time together. One day, he told me that he wanted to meet my mother. I asked him why, and he said that by tradition, he needed to get my mother's permission to marry me. I was ecstatic and felt as if I were floating in the air. I rushed home breathless to tell Mom, who was not only my mother, but my best friend as well. When she saw me, she said, "So, someone wants to marry you, huh?" she said. Amazed, I asked her, "How did you know?" She replied, "I can tell by that euphoric look on your face and your rosy cheeks." Then she smiled lovingly. I invited Ethan to come by my home tomorrow at 8 o'clock, and I began counting down the hours till his arrival. At 8 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang, and when I opened the door briskly, he was standing there holding a bouquet of flowers. He handed the flowers to me, and I invited him to come in and sit in the sitting room. I went to Mom's room to hurry her up. Then I returned to sit with Ethan. Mom appeared at the door saying, "Hello, Ethan. Please forgive me for not greeting you at the door." I looked at Ethan. His eyes were transfixed on Mom's face. From that point, he never took his eyes off Mom for the rest of the evening. Even worse than that, whenever he would speak to her, he would just ignore me completely, as if I weren't in the same room as they were. And his looks weren't simply looks of admiration. No, they seemed to be deeper than that. I was both stunned and hurt. I had to struggle to suppress my rolling thoughts. When he finally had to leave and excused himself, he ended up not even saying a word about our marriage. Instead, he just promised Mom that he would visit her again sometime. "Ethan is so cute," Mom said after he left. Peeved, I asked, "Is he just cute, or did you like him a lot?" "I like him a lot because he will be your future husband," she replied, looking at me strangely. I was so jealous of my mom. Do you believe it? I went to my room and found a message from Ethan. "I enjoyed my visit immensely. I simply adore your mom. She is so elegant." I stabbed at my phone's touchscreen and messaged back, "Well, what about me? Am I elegant too?" He replied defensively, "Yes, of course, you are always beautiful. That goes without saying. I love you." Ethan spent the next few days constantly talking about my mom. He even asked me for her phone number. The nerve of this guy! I suddenly saw my love life crashing in flames and became so jealous of my mother that I avoided speaking to her altogether. Ethan was now speaking with her more than me. I began to argue with him over silly, trivial things. He asked me what was wrong, but I didn't answer him. I just gave him the cold shoulder treatment. One day, Mom and I were watching a movie at home, and I couldn't help but notice that she was receiving a text message every minute or so. She casually but subtly held her cell phone at just such an angle that I couldn't inadvertently read the text messages from my vantage point. Ooh, how I hated my mother at that moment. Suddenly the doorbell rang. She put down her cell phone to go answer the door. In that instant, I snatched it up and began ravenously scanning her message thread. From Ethan. Your face is etched in my heart. I immediately took a screenshot and forwarded it to my phone. When Mom returned from answering the door, I showed her the message from Ethan that I had read and demanded an explanation. She seemed confused, then enlightened, and said, "Oh, okay, I can explain. Just calm down." I shouted angrily, "Explain what? That you two are lovers and I am a blind fool?" She replied in a sage, calm voice, "There is a misunderstanding here, and if you will calm down for just a minute, I can explain everything." Suddenly, I heard Ethan's voice behind me. He proudly held out a necklace to show me. It had Mom's picture in it. I was incensed, outraged. I said, "You have the gall to show me this necklace with my mom's picture in it? My God!" Confused and taken aback at my sudden outburst of animosity, he cautiously offered in clarification. No, she isn't your mom. She's mine. Look again." Stumped, I looked at the photo more closely. He was right. The woman in the necklace wasn't Mom. When I first looked at her, I mistook her for Mom. The resemblance was uncanny. He explained gently, "When I first met your mom, I was overjoyed. I felt that destiny had granted me not only a new wife, but a second mother as well. When I called your mom the first time, I told her that she looked just like my mother, and I asked her to please consider me as her son, too." I was shocked, speechless. Mom and Ethan were both crying tears of joy. "I am so sorry for my jealous behavior. Please forgive me for my stupidity," I said in a deeply apologetic voice. "Today is my wedding day, and I'm very pleased and proud to tell all my readers out there that my mom loves my husband and he her." And isn't that just the sweetest thing?
This is Tina, and this is a story about me and my biological mother. My mother is sitting in the cafe of a garden center, staring at her cup of tea. I'm over the other side of the shop looking at some strawberry preserves. I want to attract her attention, but the word mom sticks in my throat. I use it so infrequently. Instead of calling out, I just walk over and show her the jam. Ever since I left home 15 years ago, the relationship between my mother and me has worsened. In hindsight, it was never very good to start with, but it's taken 15 years of counseling and soul searching to realize that. The fact of it is that my mother and I don't like each other much. We don't hate each other, we're just sort of indifferent. There, I've said it, indifferent. Saying it feels like committing some sort of crime. My mother and I live hundreds of miles apart, and in the case of most of my friends, this should mean that visiting home should be a time of joy and excitement. Instead, they are weekends of tense, polite conversation, both of us desperately searching for something in common to talk about. And that is usually what she's currently watching on television. As a 20-something woman, I'm constantly surrounded by reminders that my mom should be my best friend. Advertising aimed at my demographic features glamorous, youthful mothers going to the salons with their best friend daughters. Because it's all so alien to me, I tend to become a little bit fixated. I tend to look beyond the principal plot lines of films and become obsessed with the parts that involve a mother and a daughter for a large, loving family headed by a quirky matriarch. When the film Mamma Mia came out, I went to see it with a girlfriend for a bit of a laugh. It was mainly about love affairs between Meryl Streep and her exes. As I watched, I was as always bewildered by the apparently natural bond that mothers and daughters have on screen. Another film. It's complicated. Again with Meryl Streep has a plot that hinges on her post-divorce relationship with her ex-husband. But the highlights for me, the way her children clustered around her and the way she reacted when they all came back to visit. Though I know it's not just on screen. My friend Susie has the same exact sort of relationship with her mom. It baffles and fascinates me. They talk every single day, sometimes more often, and tell each other everything. I didn't have an unhappy upbringing. I wasn't a happy child, but that wasn't down to child abuse or neglect. I was well clothed, fed, and I even had ballet lessons. I went to university paid for by my parents, and I knew and I still know that there's always somewhere to stay if I need to. But my mother and I never had the sort of closeness I saw in my friends' relationships. They would go shopping or share secrets. They would tell their moms things about their lives. The one time I tried to ask my mother about her teenage years, she told me to mind my own business. And so I did. I grew up minding my own business and she minded hers. I left home as soon as possible and met my now husband at university, and he quickly stepped into the role of best friend and emotional support giver. I made enduring friendships, most of which I believe to be unconditional. Most of my friends believe me to be a loving and caring individual, and I know I could turn to any one of them in an emergency, and them to me. Yet I cannot remember the last time my mother and I hugged, even though I hug my friends all the time, and the very thought of it makes me cringe. My mother is the last person I go to in a crisis. She is certainly the last person to whom I would tell a secret or a problem. And if I'm honest, I don't need to anymore, as I have my own friends now. But my lack of a close friendship with her bothers other people a lot. When I say that I don't have a close relationship with her, they ask whether we fight a lot. But no, I don't recall ever having a fight with my mother. That would entail caring enough to bother. I used to go through phases of worrying about it and trying to repair the damage, but all the while I was aware that I was doing it for other people. I visit infrequently, but I visit. I do it not so I can see her, but if I'm honest, so her neighbors and family can see me visiting. A few years ago, before I realized I didn't care anymore, I called her up and asked whether we could sort it out. Her answer told me everything I needed to know. Sort what out? I stopped bothering from that moment on. Now my principal concern is explaining to people why I don't see her that often. And I feel guilty for not really having a good enough reason. My parents weren't divorced. My father died a few years ago. There has been no huge family dispute. There's no big skeleton in anyone's cupboard, well, not mine anyway. I recently went to see a nurse for a routine appointment, and she asked a host of questions about my mother. Eventually, I had to confess that I didn't know half the answers. She asked whether I could find out. My heart sank as I imagined having to give away a detail of my life, such as why I was going to the nurse to my own mother. Mother's Day is a nightmare. Trying to find a card that doesn't say my mother is my best friend or the best mother in the world or my heroine is not easy, let me tell you. Others try to fix it for me. Why don't you book a spa weekend for your mom? The very thought of my mother agreeing to or enjoying something like that is just laughable. Or they ask, why don't you go for counseling? This would be all well and good if she would ever condone the idea, but it implies a relationship that needs to be mended. Why does it need to be fixed at all? Were my mother a woman I had met on a train and chatted to for half an hour, she would be one of the last people in the world I would want to talk to for a further half hour. If she wasn't my mother, she would be someone I groaned about having to spend any time with. I simply grew up and discovered that I didn't like my mother as a human being. She's not like me. She's self-obsessed, not interested in others, thoughtless, and incapable of genuine warmth. She has no concept of giving love to receive love, and has never asked me a single meaningful question about my life or career. Some people might feel that I have a duty as a daughter to be there for my mother, that it's down to me to repair our relationship. But because of the way she's raised me, I don't feel there is a relationship to repair. I wish my mother no harm, and if she were in trouble, I would help her like a shot. But I would also be there for any of my neighbors and the old man who swears at people from the bus stop across the road.